watching the Urban Debate on Mirror. I'm Faye. Thank you for joining us. This is an important conversation to have. A conversation that a lot of people in the mainstream media have not picked up until now, and that's the question of fake news. Last week, there was one member of the press, Mahesh Hegde, in Karnataka, who was arrested for publishing one story on his website Postcard. The story basically said, and this is what he put out, very sad news yesterday in Karnataka, Jain Muni attacked by Muslim youth. No one is safe in Siddaramaya's Karnataka. It then emerged that the person in the photograph, indeed a Jain monk, met with a road accident when he was on his way to Shravanabelagola in Karnataka. The arrest was made under Section 153A IPC, which deals with an attempt to promote enmity between religious groups, and Section 295A that addresses a deliberate malicious act intended to outrage sentiments. Section 120B of the IPC refers to criminal conspiracy. Now, there are very important things we have to talk about when it comes to fake news. And let me put this out here as why I'm having this conversation. Now, from the time journalism started, from the advent of journalism, there have been mistakes that were made, errors that were made, because newsrooms are fundamentally run by human beings. And human beings will make errors. And you will have human errors in newspapers, in television channels, and there's a process in place for that. The newspaper normally prints out an apology, or the television channel will print out an apology, apologizing for the error and taking note of it and condoning for it in front of its viewers or its readers. The question we have to ask here is about malified intent. What happens when the news is designed to cause problems between two members of community or two parts of our community or society? What happens when the whole intent is deliberate, when the entire thing has been put out deliberately to cause problems? And is that something we have to be aware of and worried about? Again, I want to point out here that I am not in any way pretending to be perfect, neither is my team. We are not in any way saying that we don't make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. We're not saying in any way someone should or should not be arrested. There is a law and order machinery, there are laws for it, and there is a court, there's a judiciary that will decide how this should proceed. My worry and my responsibility is simply to you. If there is a problem of fake news in our country, where people are falsifying details and putting out stories with a deliberate attempt to brainwash you, and I have a responsibility to sound you off and warn you about it, to caution you about it, so that the next time you read something on WhatsApp or on Facebook, you realize that you can't believe everything you read. Outside of that, it is for the courts to decide, it is for the police to investigate. Now, we have with us tonight an amazing panel that my team has worked very hard to put together to help us understand. And I want to point out to our viewers, there are no politicians on this panel at all. The idea is to understand the problem of fake news, to understand how bad it is. If you and I should be more cautious, and is it really ripping the fabric of our society apart? So joining me on the show, Pratik Sinha, co-founder of Alt News, Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate with the Supreme Court, Jen C. Jacob, managing editor at Boom, Anand Ranganathan, author and scientist, Pavan Dugal, senior advocate with the Supreme Court and an expert in cyber law, and Shantanu Bhate is a columnist with opindia.com. I thank all of you for joining us on the show. This is a really important show, and I'm very glad that we could get together such a fantastic panel. I'm going to start with Pratik Sinha, the co-founder at Alt News. Pratik, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, I want to ask you simply this. Do you believe that fake news in India, and we know that fake news is being talked about across the world, but in India, do you believe that it is a serious problem? Is it actually causing harm to society?
Absolutely. And yes, fake news is a global issue. In fact, me and Jency, who's also there on the panel, we have recently been to a Google conference in Jakarta where, there are people from across Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific, where we were asked to make sort of lighting speeches, what is the fake news situation in your country? And while other countries had their own fake news situation, but the kind of divisiveness that is spread in India via fake news is, and the momentum it gathers. Yes, the problem is also in countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, where people are as sensitive about religious issues as we are in India, but the kind of momentum, because the kind of internet reach that India now has, so the kind of momentum that such fake news gathers is huge. And even if it does not always sort of result into violence, sometimes it does. Like in Jharkhand, 7 people died. In Boshirhat, a morphed image led to violence, a morphed image of a religious place. Similarly, this happened in Pune about 2-3 years ago. So it may not always lead to violence, but it is doing an enormous harm to the society in terms of how it is creating a divisive atmosphere.
Right. So Pratik, tell me this. Take us through, and I must tell you, we have, our viewers are commenting already. Akhil from Gurgaon says Alt News is doing a fantastic job. So I just wanted to let you know that, Pratik. But tell me, there have been several cases that you have gone through on Alt News. Give us a couple of examples, on our screen as well, so that our audience understands what you mean when you say fake news.
So, I'll present a couple of examples where, when situation was tense and a rumor was spread, which is the most dangerous because that leads, that amounts to fueling violence. So, for example, there were riots happening in a town called Boshirhat in West Bengal. And at that point, an image was put out which claimed that a woman was being molested, a Hindu woman was being molested. Now, if you remember, in case of Boshirhat, it was the minority community which had come down on the road and indulged in riots. And at that point of time, it was claimed that this Hindu woman was being molested. Later, we found out, we fact-checked it, and we found out that it was actually a clip from a Bhojpuri movie. So that. Now, recently, there were riots in Dakshin Kannada. And what happened was a BJP MLA gave out a statement saying that a young boy's body was fished out of the lake, and this BJP MLA gave out a statement that he was castrated, he was burnt with boiling oil, so on and so forth. And now that same rumor was propagated by all these fake news websites like Postcard News itself. And now these are the situation, and eventually when the postmortem report came out, all these claims were untrue. So problem is that, there is a lot of fake news, but especially the kind which is the most dangerous is when a place is already tense, when riots are already happening, and then you use fake news to further the riots, fuel more violence.
Right. I want to bring this conversation over right now to Jency Jacob. Jency Jacob is the managing editor of Boom. Jency, there are several cases that you've looked at as well.
Yeah.
Cases like Pratik Sinha was just talking about. And it incidentally happens to be International Fact-Checking Day.
Right.
So happy Fact-Checking Day to
Thank
everybody
you,
on the panel, since this is what you guys do. Do you believe that our problem is as acute or worse than it is overseas right now, and why?
It is worse because I often cite these numbers. In fact, whenever we meet international fact checkers, they talk about WhatsApp, they talk about other social media apps, and how see, the problems are the same everywhere. Family groups, then there are groups where so many groups on social media where things are shared which has never been verified. But here's a number that I want to throw at you. 200 million WhatsApp active monthly users is what you have in the country today. Now, that could be the entire population of several countries, So this is the scale of the challenge that we have right now, where these kind of social media apps are being utilized not to share family pictures and talking to friends and for what it was originally planned for, but it is being used to spread news and to also understand, to get your first source as news is WhatsApp. Now, when that happens, it's a serious problem because you're not depending on credible news websites, but you're depending on WhatsApp for your daily news.
So there's one story that's running on our screen right now, and I want to use this as an example. This one came from Boom, from what I understand. This was about the temple in Madurai. Can you take our viewers through this story?
So this is, a postcard which put out the story. where they claimed that based on a tweet, couple of tweets on Twitter, that's all the fact checking they have done. They said that there was this Christian procession which was going around in Madurai, and they went and forcibly entered the Shivagami temple there, and they said that that property is their own. Now, if when someone puts a story like that, imagine the kind of panic it can create. Now, what did we do? We called up the local SP. We called up a couple of journalists there who had covered that procession. And what we got to know is that this was just a tension between two communities, which Postcard had actually taken to a stand where they said that Christian community, they came inside the temple and they took over the property and said this is our own property. Now, this is a story that we debunked, and in fact, you'll be very interested to know this, Faye, that one of very senior respected editors, he in fact shared Postcard's story, and then we pointed it out to him, and then he apologized and he said he retracted that tweet. So this is the extent. Even editors can actually fall for Postcard kind of stories.
Right. Let me bring in Sanjay Hegde for a comment now before we get the rest of our panelists on board. Okay, Sanjay Hegde is not with us right now. All right. We have one more very interesting fact checker with us. Shantanu Bhati joins us from opindia.com. Shantanu, thank you for joining us. If your audio is through and you can hear me clearly. Okay, I wanted to ask Shantanu. Shantanu, obviously there is a problem with fake news, which is why we have so many different websites right now tackling that problem of fake news, because there's so much of it going around. What is the biggest risk India is facing? And like was pointed out by Gen Z, I think the biggest risk right now would be WhatsApp, because WhatsApp virality is so immediate, it's so fast, and a lot of times, most of the time, you don't know where the source of that information comes from. It just says forward as received, and it's moving, and nobody can trace the origin of that information. Shantanu, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Faye. So, as pointed out by the gentleman, WhatsApp is the biggest threat that exists as far as fake news is concerned today, because whatever you receive on WhatsApp, it's forwarded to multiple groups within minutes, and the source of that information is never verified. So one simple example of how fake news spreads is a story published on Op India a couple of days ago, wherein a US-based journalist, he posted a video which showed a few cars burning and a mob behind the cars, and he claimed that the video was of Hindutva fanatics burning properties belonging to Muslims. But it was later revealed that the video was actually from the Koregaon Bhima incident a couple of months ago. So it had nothing to do with Hindu or Muslims. And this particular person is a repeat offender as far as spreading fake news is concerned. And it's not limited to, obscure journalists like him. Even very established senior journalists from India oftentimes spread fake news. There was one incident of a senior journalist claiming that a woman was gang raped in Uttar Pradesh for eating beef. But when Uttar Pradesh police did a fact check on it, they found that there's no such incident which has happened. So it's not only obscure websites or startups like Postcard or specific people from one side of the political spectrum who share fake news. It's a problem which is common across the spectrum.
Right. Let me bring in Pawan Dugal. Pawan Dugal, senior advocate. Mr. Dugal, the question that we have to ask here is this. There's obviously, when there are tweets that go out, or when there are stories that go out, there's a very fine, thin line here between freedom of speech and inciting offense. Where do you stand on this line? What do you believe ought to be done? Is there a method, or is there a way in which we can bring this under control?
Definitely, I think different countries across the world are now beginning to look in the direction with appropriate legal frameworks so as to regulate these kind of fake news. But the perpetuators of fake news often say that they have a fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, I believe it's a fundamental right, but you do not have this right to go ahead. I equate fake news with hitting somebody below the belt. Now, in the context of India, where India is going through a huge, great Indian vomiting revolution, where Indians are vomiting all kinds of data about their personal, professional, and social lives, and also all the data that they immediately consume on WhatsApp, and in a great amount of hurry to get their 15 seconds of fame published. forward or transmit the same. I think this has become very, very fertile for the dissemination of fake news. Complicating this entire scenario is that the Indian legal framework is completely inadequate to deal with fake news.
Right.
Technically, a fake, but
Right.
post electronic record.
Right. We'll go back to Pavan Dugal when we have a clearer line with him. The audio is not very good. Anand Ranganathan is an author and a scientist, and also someone gravely concerned with the problem of fake news. Like our other panelists were pointing out, Anand, there are some very severe, serious cases that ought to be looked at by law and order. But how do we draw that line between what is freedom of expression and speech and what is fake news?
Yeah, thanks very much, Faye, for having me. At the outset, I'd like to say that, three phrases that actually jumped out from the primer for this debate and this debate are actually fake news, spreading hate, and, as Mirror Now tweet suggested, dividing India. So let me say that the biggest peddler of fake news is actually religion. The largest mainstreaming of hate is through religious holy books. And finally, the third point, which was dividing India, the biggest divider of India is actually religion. And what do? All of us, me a little bit less than perhaps all of you, believers maybe, are very comfortable with it. In fact, we have laws that protect religion and hate that is propagated by religion. I mean, all of us know Section 295A, and in fact, it came about through Rangila Rasool that Ambedkar stood for and Mahatma Gandhi stood against. And as you know, Rampal was actually murdered, assassinated, and when Ilmuddin, the assassinator, the assassin, was actually hanged, that was when this law came about. So freedom is very dear to us. If we were to start arresting people for fake news or for offending religious sensibilities, we must remember that trying to say what is malified, what is malicious, what is a rumor, what should be prosecuted is actually delving into this subjective territory, and that is where the problems start. And let me now come on to fake news. Of course it is a problem, but the thing is, if you start arresting people, you have to first judge the malified intent. And there, let me say, let me disagree a little bit with Prateek here, which is that it is not the quantity of fake news that is the problem. For want of a better word, the quality, I mean it in a negative connotation, the quality of fake news actually can be disastrous. And I think one of the panelists took the example of a journalist that actually spread this fake news saying that women in UP have been gang raped because of eating beef. Now that tweet is still there. And in fact, let me just say that I do not know of any journalist who has not peddled, accidentally or otherwise, fake news. I dare say, Faye, even you are not immune to it. In fact, one of your tweets was actually refuted by CBI. But to come back to the matter, the point here is very simple. If we are going to arrest, by all means punish people who peddle fake news. But if you're going to arrest people who peddle fake news or accidentally or otherwise, then I dare say Indian journalism would cease to exist, either of the variety of the mainstream journalism or the media houses or postcard or people who run such channels. And I think that the crux of the problem here is, before we come to cite a few other examples, I think Elphinstone was one, where a reputed journal like Hindu actually turned out to be, when they said that the victims was actually sexually groped, and it turned out to be completely false. Of course, they apologized, but by that time, that story had been picked up by 7 international media houses, including Independent and Guardian and everything, and they didn't apologize, right? Then, of course, one of the most famous fake news instances is that Modi promised that he's going to deposit 15 lakhs in each of our accounts, which is, of course, he never said that. But there are other serious matters of fake news as well, and I think the other, one of the panelists mentioned one of the foreign journalists actually peddling fake videos. Then there was another instance where another journalist during the BHU fracas, she tweeted a photograph of a lady that she said she has been thrashed and she was injured lying on a bed. Turned out it wasn't that instance at all.
That incident. All right,
but
let me just one second. Yes,
that,
Anand.
the second biggest peddler of fake news after Yeah.
Jency disagrees with you. Let me give Jency an opportunity to rebut. Jency, please go ahead.
So Faye, it's not about the fact that whether people should be arrested or not. I do agree with Anand that if you allow the government to start deciding what is right news and what is fake news, they will start. I mean, every journalist who's anti-establishment would be inside, would be behind bars. But here's a distinction that I would like to draw. Is postcard news, first of all, they call themselves postcard news, but is it a news website? Because there are several stories that we have busted where we have said that it's not about wrong information or the fact that they have not added credible information, but the fact that they are actually creating enmity between communities. Now, the incident for which he's been arrested, the Jain Muni, there's an accident case that has happened. Now, if he calls himself an editor or a founder, the first thing that he should be doing is to find out whether this is true or not. How does he tweet this information out? And then, there is no apology, there is nothing that is done. And, someone decides to go and file a case, and that is where this finally ended. So, which is why we have constantly said that postcard is not a legitimate news website, because the moment you say that, you're doing a great disservice to other journalists as well who take their craft very seriously, and that's where we need to draw the dividing line. Now the fact whether journalists should be arrested or not arrested, that's a debate that I agree broadly, that you cannot be going around arresting people, but at the end of the day there has to be something which is going to prevent some of them to do this.
Let me bring in Sanjay Hegde here. Sanjay Hegde, obviously the cornerstone of any democracy is the freedom of speech and expression, like Anand quite rightly pointed out. How do we draw that line between maintaining that freedom and protecting our society from fake news?
I think the Supreme Court has already drawn a line. Maybe it needs to be extended. You see, in the 66A case, Shreya Singhal, the judgment says that there are three kinds of speech: discussion, advocacy, and incitement. When you discuss things, when it's clear you're discussing, when they are views and not news, protected. Advocacy, this must happen, this should happen, or we must have prohibition, we may, that again is protected. But when it comes to incitement, when you deliberately say something so that somebody is incited to riot, somebody is incited to kill another, that is where the problem lies. And as far as insightful speech is concerned, you basically have to check out whether the propagation was deliberate, was it inadvertent, or does the man have a history of deliberately using provocative examples in the hope that some mischief goes afoot. I think that there are provisions in the law, or the law has developed well enough to recognize where deliberate fake news designed to incite can be either punished criminally, or the steps can be taken to impose punitive damages so that the person does not repeat it. Maybe do we need special laws for that? That is another question altogether. But even under the existing laws, there is quite a bit of scope. You have seen the Union Finance Minister, for example, taking his political opponents to court under defamation. He's at least secured an apology.
Yes.
They similarly, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, there are sections like 295, etc., where if there is any news which is deliberately sent out so that people get incited into violence,
right.
You have to trace the source.
Yes.
Prosecute that person, as well as levy some penalty on those who spread it further.
Right. So Sanjay Hegde is drawing a line there on inciting violence between communities, and Jency Jacobs drawing the line at what is it, whether it's a news agency or just an ordinary citizen. A news agency should be held more accountable. But I just want to bring in on that note, just to keep illustrating to our audience what we're talking about. Prateek Sinha, the story that that you did on Alt News about the Hanuman Jayanti video that went viral as well. Do you want to explain that to our audience, please?
Yeah. Yeah, so this was again by Postcard News, and this is also a member of BJP Asansol IT cell. That is how he described himself on his Twitter profile. So what had happened was that a video was put out by both these, by both Postcard and Mr. Tarun Sen Gupta, where it was claimed that Hanuman Bhakts were being beaten on Hanuman Jayanti by two Muslim IPS officers, and he named those IPS officers. When we fact checked, we found that that video was available on YouTube at least 4 years prior to this particular event, the Hanuman Jayanti. I think this was 2017 Hanuman Jayanti, and this video was available on YouTube at least 4 years prior to that. So then we wrote about it, and then I believe West Bengal police filed a case against Tarun Sen Gupta, and I think he was briefly arrested. Postcard News went and deleted the article just the way they deleted the Jain Muni articles and several other articles. When they think that it's going to become legally tricky, that is when they simply go and delete the articles. And I also want to come here, the point that Mr. Ranganathan was making is that, we keep talking about the journalists who put out that beef story. But if we look at the number of tweets that that particular tweet had got, I think it still hasn't crossed probably, and most of the tweets are, refuting her. And, so Twitter is an open medium that way. What happens in case of Postcard is that they don't just run Postcard News, they run several pages. They run pages like I Support Ajit Doval, they run something with the name of Mr. Modi. So there are these several pages from which information is put out. They also create infographics, which are easy to share on WhatsApp. So when I say, the quantity of fake news, I also refer to, the velocity of fake news and how it is pushed in an aggressive manner so as to make things go viral. That journalist was not trying to make it go viral. While there are several of these fake news agencies, they do it with the purpose to make things viral. All of these websites, they maintain multiple Facebook pages which have well over 500, 600,000, a million users. So the amount of people that the information is going to, and then going on to other mediums like WhatsApp, Facebook, and then it becomes an everlasting cycle. So,
yes.
So when we are talking about fake news, this is, you also have to look at the repercussion and the extent of its spreading.
The extent of the damage and the malified intent.
For example, what happened in Jharkhand when 7 people were lynched is that Yes, and I mean, in case of Jharkhand, when 7 people were lynched, it is because that had become viral. That particular issue had become viral. So it is not just that, you put out, yes, this journalist made an error and till now hasn't deleted the tweet, which is very unfortunate.
Yes.
But the fact is that it did not go much beyond that. While in several of these cases, these Jain Muni cases, I know that it was circulating on WhatsApp because, I am on certain WhatsApp groups where I can see that this stuff is circulating. So it is also the extent to which the information is spread and the attempt that is made to actually make things go viral.
All right, Anand, I see your hand go up, and I'm opening the panel up right now, but I have Ruchika Paul on the phone line, and some of our viewers are also calling in. Ruchika Paul from Batinda, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Ruchika, go ahead. We can hear you.
Good evening, Faye. Actually, my name is not it's Ritika.
Ritika, okay, I'm sorry. Ritika, go ahead.
It's okay. Actually, I'm a student pursuing BTech in CSC, and I want to spread the news through you. It's to all the people sitting here and watching this news that please, we as students, we as the new generation want everyone to be just treated as one caste, creed, religion, and that is just Indian. Because we are seeing all these fake news and it is affecting our lives also.
Absolutely, very well said, Ritika, very well said. I don't, you have to have a rift, a crack to begin with for someone to be able to widen it. This is what Anand was talking about in the beginning as well. Anand, go ahead. You wanted to respond to something Prateek was saying.
Yeah, I mean, first to what Mr. Hegde said, and then again to Prateek. Sorry, Prateek. But I think I quite like what Mr. Hegde said, at least a part of it, which is that punitive damages is a good idea. Now, why I disagree again with Prateek is that this is exactly what I fear. What Prateek just did was that it would induce other people to do, which is that trying to judge what is mala fide, what is malicious intent, and looking at just few examples. Now, it might be what Prateek said is true, that the tweet that was regarding the eating beef and women being gang raped was not retweeted or wasn't peddled to an extent that the postcard one thing. But again, you see, it just takes a matter of, again, I'm on thin territory because I'm a free speech absolutist, and I realize that we have laws that do not protect absolute free speech. So going by the Indian scenario, we would have instances, supposing an instance had occurred based on that journalist's tweet, and 10 instances or 10 fake news peddled by postcard, nothing happened. So, you know, when you are judging something, you are into this territory of grey, which is trying to find out if M.F. Hussain did something bad, offended religious sensibilities, or Rangila Sultan. So I like this idea of...
We seem to have lost that connection. Let me actually take this also back to Shantanu of opindia.com. Shantanu, there was a story you and I were talking about that Opindia picked up about the crisscrosses that were used to mark homes in Ahmedabad. That was also a fake news story that went viral. Can you walk our audience through that story, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the run-up to Gujarat elections, there was a story that surfaced in mainstream media that a lot of houses belonging in Muslim-dominated areas in Ahmedabad have been marked with red crosses. And, you know, some people called it Nazi style of branding or identifying your opponent, so on and so forth. And it created a lot of panic because, you know, even mainstream media picked it up very quickly, and it spread and it created panic. But when people investigated it further, it was revealed that the crosses had nothing to do with Hindus or Muslims or any religion as such. They were marked by Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation to install GPS devices to track vehicles that come for picking up the garbage. So this story had nothing to do with Hindus or Muslims or any religious tension in the area. It was installed for it was marked for a legitimate purpose by the municipal corporation, but still it created panic. And several journalists, one belonging to The Wire, there was an activist, Teesta Setalwad, her trust also spread that fake news that marks have suddenly appeared on Muslims' houses in Ahmedabad. So this also has potential to create potential conflict in between communities.
Prateek, go ahead.
I want to come in here for a second. Yeah, so Wire actually rebutted that fake news because I belong to Ahmedabad, and me and the journalist who wrote the story in Wire, Damayanti Dar, both of us had gone to this area, and it's called Paldi, and we ourselves saw the crosses, and then we went to multiple flats, and as it is being truly stated, these crosses were not exclusively to Muslim flats. They were also there in flats which had majority Hindu occupants. But the information about Wire spreading that fake news is completely false, because Damayanti Dar, who was with me, who investigated
I didn't say that Wire spread the fake news. I said that Wire journalists tweeted that Nazi-style crosses have been put up on Muslim houses in Ahmedabad. Right?
Plus, a little detail that you missed here was, because we actually went to the ground and investigated this, the little detail that you missed here was that basically the issue was that a lot of these new AMC trucks, they are GPS enabled, but what was happening was that this was a very narrow street, and in narrow streets what happens is that your GPS signal doesn't work well because there are these multiple narrow streets parallel to each other, and sometimes the GPS cannot figure out which street it is. So what the AMC has outsourced this to contractors. And what the contractor had done without letting the AMC folks know is that they had put crosses with black chalk to say that you have to pick up garbage from here. And as I said, this was done for both Hindu and Muslim houses. So it was basically that the GPS was failing because there are too many streets in that area, and this was to sort of help these people figure out where to pick up garbage from.
All right, Jensi, as we move closer and closer to another election in 2019, are you expecting, or is it fair to expect that this sort of thing will just keep increasing? And I'm bringing this up today because it's a day when what should have been India Bandh peaceful protest turned into a violent protest where 7 people died, which could have been avoided. And a day like this, fake news is something we should all be very, very worried about.
So, Faye, there are 2 elements to this. A, political parties have realized that this is the best way to actually keep, their political base, excited about what is happening, and also, get the fence sitters to jump on their side, and they will ensure that Facebook, on Facebook, whether these are the pages that they have, and Pratik mentioned some of the pages which, Postcard will push this out through, hundreds of pages that they have on Facebook, and it will mean, maximum audience that it is reaching out to. Also, in some way, we also have to introspect as journalists as well. Why is it that people are wanting to depend on WhatsApp groups? Why are they not depending on credible, news websites? The highlight of my day on any given day is when my friends send me stories from probably, very credible news organizations that I would, call them as, and would say that, can you verify this news? Now, that's really sad, because at the end of the day, I've often said this, despite the fact that fact checkers have had a very important role to play in the last 1 year, we cannot replace boots on the ground. That's something that only large organizations are able to bring in, because they're able to push people in Asansol, in places where there are riots happening, and reporters are going to bring you that information from the ground. We may not be able to do it because of the nature of the work that we do, which is quite small, and also we are not able to push in those many reporters. But this is, there are two issues here. One, political parties misusing many of these communities and groups that are there on various platforms so that they get maximum votes, and also they get people onto their bandwagon before an important election, and Karnataka elections are going to come in now. And also the fact that somewhere credibility of mainstream media, in terms of what you call mainstream, many people have a problem with that, but the legacy media, the kind of credibility issues that we are seeing, that is also causing a major problem.
Well, I want to ask Pavan Dugal this question, if Pavan Dugal's audio is all right now. Pavan, when we talk about WhatsApp, and quite rightly pointed out by most of our panelists, it's very difficult to find the source of the information. So how, and since most of this is circulating on WhatsApp, how do you crack down on that? How do you figure out where it came from and who started it? Is it possible to do so?
Well, it's possible to do so if we are able to come up with appropriate, strong legal frameworks mandating these service providers to do so. Typically, when I look at the terms and conditions of WhatsApp, first and foremost, it says whatever you publish on WhatsApp, audio, video, image, text is public information. Number two, they take no responsibility of anything that gets published therein, thanks to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of the US. But I think when a service like WhatsApp is targeting users in India, it purely gets governed by the Indian cyber law. And having said so, they can definitely be mandated for ensuring that as part of their documented due diligence that they have to do under the existing law, they must themselves come up with appropriate mechanisms to stop the fake news. The problem is the Supreme Court judgment in the case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India has actually inadvertently contributed to going ahead and increasing the quantum of fake news in the country. The reason for this is that in that judgment, the Supreme Court told all intermediaries and service providers, you will be straddled with so much millions or thousands of requests, so please don't act till such time you either get a court order or you get an order from a governmental agency. The net effect of that has been that service providers have been sitting pretty complacent. They do not do anything to either control or even limit the dissemination of fake news. And in any case, there is very less inclination to even comply with some basic parameters of due diligence that the Indian government has so stipulated under the IT Rules 2011. So I think what's currently missing is a political will. You need to make sure that they will come up with adequate policies.
Sanjay Hegde wants to come in. Sanjay Hegde, please go ahead.
See, taking up that point from Pavan Dugal, that service providers are not interested. It is quite possible for the government to, in its license conditions itself, say that if when we ask you for a takedown request, then you will take down material which is on any platform. A video is going viral on WhatsApp. It is not difficult to design certain solutions whereby it at least is not transmitted through the mobile networks, because your biggest problem of fake news does not come from your laptops and your other such computer equipment. It comes from your mobile phones itself. So data which goes through mobile networks can at least be in some fashion or the other filtered particularly for content-rich videos, which because it's the videos which are the most inciting. If you see what I mean. So it is possible that at least there can be one single window where people can complain that, sir, there is such and such a video with these comments attached. This video constitutes fake news. Please put it down. And the government, acting on such complaints, can ask service providers to bring the to not allow that content to be transmitted.
Do you agree, Jensi?
Yeah, that can be done. Also, the unfortunate part is that websites are not governed by any license condition right now.
Yes.
The other day I asked someone, they said, that anyone can start a website in India, a news website, calling it a news website, whether they have credible journalists running it or not, and they can, start from the word go.
So
that's also a big problem.
This is important, and this is something our viewers should know. Television news channels have to get licenses from the government. Radio channels have to get licenses from the government. They're monitored. Newspapers have to get licenses. Magazines have to get licenses. So they're all licensed and monitored and regulated organizations. But internet is not right now.
So that's the danger here, right? Because Smriti Irani is already talking about bringing in some license conditions for digital websites. Now, the flip side of that is that, the control that probably they want to wield, because that's the only, area in news where they don't have any control. Television, they can actually keep a control over. Print, they have a control. There's also Press Council of India. But websites do not have any such licensing authority.
So, that's interesting. And I want all of our, panelists' viewpoint on that. Shantanu, I'm going to come to you first. Do you believe that government should begin licensing, website news as well, or internet-based news as well? Or do you think that would just be control?
So before coming to that, I would like to revert to Mr. Hegde and Mr. Duggal on a technical point, right? So Mr. Hegde said that government can ask internet service providers to block specific videos which are circulating on WhatsApp. But technically, it's not possible because WhatsApp communication between devices and servers it's end-to-end encrypted. So the service provider cannot selectively block any video or a particular traffic. Exactly. They will either block entire WhatsApp communication or they'll have to allow everything. So, preventing the spread of videos via internet is a difficult thing. You can either be a China and monitor every communication that's going from every device to every server, or there's no other way of stopping the spread of video. The only way in which the spread of fake news can be prevented is by creating awareness among the people that whenever you receive a particular news or a particular video, don't immediately forward it. Try to find whether that's legitimate video. Hold on to that information for some time. If it's a fake video, probably in a couple of hours, somebody will debunk it. So technically, it's not possible to selectively filter content coming from these news websites. You'll have to either block them or you'll have to allow everything. This applies for HTTPS websites which are secure.
Right, and I just want, Jensi, I want to bring you in on this, and this is, you talked about, and both Mr. Sanjay Hegde talked about malicious intent in terms of inciting. But there's another angle to it, and this was a story that you did of MPs caught sleeping during the budget session. And this is not, this is technically not inciting, but it's defamatory.
So, this was a handle called Aisi Taisi Democracy who had put out, that's a satire handle. Now, they had put out this, this image, which was a screenshot where you can see in this that Arun Jaitley had just stood to deliver the budget speech, and you can see Nitin Gadkari, who circled next to him, who, when he just stepped, he looked down. At that time, the screenshot took that image, and they put out saying that Nitin Gadkari and also Dr. Harshvardhan, both of them were sleeping when the finance minister was delivering the speech. Now, in fact, we went back to the video and we looked at it, and we saw that it was it was a screenshot which was taken at an opportune time and put out. Now, there were several people who shared this. They then later on realized that when they saw the video which we had put out in the story, that this was not true. Now, the handle which originally shared
not
this,
asleep at all in that video.
No, definitely not, and he's sitting right there behind.
Yes.
Now, this is something that both BJP and the Congress target each other, right? It's their favorite, ploy that they have. But unfortunately, once you take a screenshot and you put out something, unless you go back to the source and look at the video, no one can find out, and most people with the confirmation bias they have regarding one party or the other will never bother to do that.
So do you believe that, while that stays on the screen, do you believe that this should merit any sort of, action, or do you think that the action should only remain, like Sanjay Hegde said, to something that incites people between communities?
I would think that this is, you cannot take action against this, because this is something that was tweeted out. Immediately people went and looked at the video, the original handle deleted it immediately. People who shared it, also some of the verified handles, they immediately apologized as well. So I don't think this, some part of it you need to take it a bit leniently as well, and you need to look at it as a moment of satire as well. But where you are actually talking about inciting violence between two communities, I think the jury is still out, about how we should be handling this.
So, a very quick question, to anyone who wants to answer this. For someone who's watching at home, how do they tell the difference between what is fake and meant to incite their emotion vis-a-vis what is actually meant to believe? Would you say rely only on the big agencies or the big newspapers, or, the guys who have been doing news for decades? How do we know what is true and what is not true? Pratik, do you want to take this?
So, I mean, a lot of this, some of this is a little technologically difficult in the sense, for a lot of people, we are not just talking about the urban crowd, we are also talking about a huge rural population that we have who probably have WhatsApp, but probably have never gone to google.com. So, that is a different kind of demographic issue also that we have. But those who probably, our urban population, many things can be easily done. For example, you get an image on your WhatsApp, and which is claiming something. You go to reverse.photos, which is and then you upload the image and you do a reverse search, and you go through the search results and find out what possibly could be the context. You can also use the time filter. On the top in Android, on top there's 3 dots, and you go to request desktop, look at the time filter, and see when this image was initially circulated. Videos is a little more difficult, where you have to break down the video into images, but often taking the screenshot of the first frame of the video, if you take the screenshot of that and do a reverse image search, very often you find out how in what context the video was circulated. And something like, for example, just now we are writing a story about, there's a fake news on Facebook which claims that Shah Rukh Khan has said that if Mr. Modi does not become the Prime Minister, he is going to leave the country in 2019. Now we just Googled those words. It's in Hindi. We just Googled those words. It goes to a website called lalluram.com, which clearly says that it is an April Fool prank. But that bit has been taken out, and they're only sharing the part which was supposed to be satire, not with without the disclaimer. So sometimes just simple Googling,
and also,
is what takes
forgive me for interrupting you, but Jetsi, also quotes, fake quotes
fake
are a big
quotes,
thing.
It's Raghuram Rajan, a classic example. Raghuram Rajan saying that I had warned Rahul Gandhi and P. Chidambaram about the Nirav Modi scam, but they did not do anything, and now why am I being blamed for it? What did it require?
Was a fake quote completely.
Yeah, it was a complete fake quote, and in fact, again, our favorite postcard had also put that out with their logo as well, with an image of Raghuram Rajan, and we wrote to Raghuram Rajan and immediately replied back in about 10 minutes, the fastest reply I've ever received from anyone, where he said that I've never given any quote on this issue at all. So fake quote is something that we need to be extremely careful about. Faye, here is what I would suggest, all the viewers here. The moment you receive anything on WhatsApp, it just takes 2 minutes to go and Google the exact sentence there and check it out.
Just copy paste into your browser.
We have done this on 100% of our stories that we get, and we always get results out of it.
Shantanu, do you agree? Just copy paste one portion of that statement into your browser, just run a search, you'll be able to find the source. And if it's not a bona fide news agency, then you should sort of treat it with a little pinch of salt.
Absolutely. Whenever you receive any information, just Google it. If you can't find any credible source for that information, even after Googling, then hold on to that information. In all likelihood, if it's a fake news or a fake video or a fake image, within a couple of hours, it will get debunked on social media, and then it will be available on Google search index. So definitely, before forwarding anything, make sure that it's the information, the news is authentic. Otherwise, do not forward that news.
All right, I've completely run out of time on this show, but I do want our panelists to promise me that you'll come back and we'll continue to do shows like this to educate our audience and to inform people of what's really going on in the kind... Anand has his hand up. All right, Anand, my producer's going to be really upset with me, but go ahead. I'll give you 20 seconds.
Okay, yeah, just 10 seconds, because I knew I was going to come on this show. So I have a bit of fake news, which unfortunately none of you fake busters have actually busted, which is the following, which is that 2 days ago, Times of India said that 25 million jobs have been created by the tourism industry this year. Now that's absolute nonsense. Not more than 400,000 jobs have been created. What they meant was that they actually took the existing number of jobs that exist in tourism and travel industry, and they made it out to be having been created in 2017. So there's work for you guys.
Well, there's work for all of us, and there is a lot to be done. But what we'll do, and I'll do it as well, on International Fact-Checking Day, which is what today is, while we wrap up the show, and I thank all of our panelists for joining us, I will leave you with this. The day after April Fool's Day is International Fact-Checking Day, and I promise you that we will continue to do shows like this on Mirror Now, where we bring in people who are verifying and fact-checking, and we'll tell you what is going on. So the least that we can do currently in India is to look at everything you get on your WhatsApp and everything you see on Facebook, raise your eyebrow and say, I don't know if I want to believe this. Especially if it has to do with religion or caste or political parties. Don't believe it. And there are also other weird things going around, like in Kerala there is a flower that is shaped like a woman. You should really consider, you wonder who has enough time to Photoshop that flower and put it out, and why isn't that person more gainfully employed? But I want to go back to what Anand and Ritika, the young student who called us on the show, said, that we're Indians. And the fact that we allow for that little crack, that little divide between religions, between caste, between the differences that we have, it gives people opportunity to tear us apart even further. There has to be a beginning in order for someone to widen that rift. We need to discard everything. So there are two jobs to be done. One, discard all of this inflammatory stuff you receive on religion, on caste, and on any other kind of difference. And you will tell, based on what the political motive is at that point, it might be about language, it might be about caste, it might be about something else. Also, write back to the person who forwarded it to you and say, please check this, it's not true. By just doing that, you will be doing a massive service to this country. We're going to try also on this channel to bring you as many of these shows as we can. Like I said, we're not pretending to be perfect. We're not perfect. God knows we've also made mistakes. But our mistakes, I promise you, are not of malified intent. We're going to try and protect the fabric of our society, because this is the India that we want our children to inherit. Thanks for watching.